beneficiary, but this is that added little touch of sadomasochistic genius. This is the adding of The Godfather and The Soprano to the mixture of Nazism and Stalinism that was, in fact, the birth of Ba'athist ideology to begin with, in case you don't know or haven't studied it. The Iraqi Ba'ath Socialist Party was modeled in large part on admiration for European National Socialist and fascist movements. Hoped to emulate them, especially in their nationalism against the West. But mutated by Saddam Hussein, it became also one that very, very much admired. He had a great admiration for and grew a special moustache in admiration of the work of Joseph Vissarionovich Dugiashvili, the great Georgian known to us historically as Stalin. So you had in modern Iraq a regime in our own time that was openly and directly modeled upon the two most extreme examples of European totalitarianism. And when I used to go there in those days, it's often very difficult when you come out of a country like this to explain to people quite what it's like when you're there. The atmosphere of terror, the look that comes into people's eyes when you mention the name of the leader, the absolute look of flash of panic. Anything could happen to me now. The person who spills their cup of coffee in the morning on a copy of the party paper that has the leader's picture on it, and everyone in the cafe goes completely quiet. You just desecrated a picture of the leader. The police are on their way now. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. And it's very likely that your family will go to prison with you. And maybe they'll have to watch you being tortured. And if they do, they'll have to applaud. And if they have to watch you being executed, they'll be later sent a bill for the bullets that were used to be fired into the back of your head and your neck, because no one's exempt. And it's often, I think, very, very, very hard for people who live in civilized countries, democratic countries, to understand what it would be like to live even a day under a regime that was like this. I used to find in arguments about Iraq that I knew right away when someone didn't know what they were talking about. And the dead giveaway would always be when they would say, all right, I agree, Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. I said, that means you don't know anything about him. If that's what you think. You don't know what it would be like to be sitting at home wondering where your daughter was and finding out because the police came round and banging on the door handed you a video while they stood there of her being raped by their colleagues, just to show you who was boss. The word evil, which I began with, I think does need a bit of justification. Many people think that to even use the word evil is sort of naive or morally too judgmental, or you know what I'm driving at, too simplistic. And yet it's somehow a word without which we cannot do. Hannah Arendt, in her study of totalitarianism, borrowed from Immanuel Kant the concept of radical evil, of evil that's so evil that in the end it destroys itself. It's so committed to evil, it's so committed to hatred and cruelty, that it becomes suicidal. My definition of it is the surplus value that's generated by totalitarianism. It means you do more violence, more cruelty than you absolutely have to stay in power. You've already made your point. You've done everything you need to do to make people realize that you're in power, but you somehow can't stop. There has to be a special appetite. There must be special prisons for rape. There must be special graves, mass graves, just for children. There must be the desire to see how far you can go. And even if you know this will in the end bring retribution, it's worth it in some sense for its own sake. Maybe that's the only redeeming thing about it. Maybe the irrationality is the one saving the grace of it, but at any rate, it's not a word, it seems, that we can abolish from our vocabulary. If you doubt me, just ask any liberal how they're going to vote at the next election, and they'll always say it's for the lesser evil. Somehow the word is necessary, even in a relativistic term. I haven't started with Iraq. I haven't begun to tell you what it's like. The nearest I can come from personal experience would be, I suppose, being present when a mass grave in the Shia districts of the south was being opened, Hilla, near Babylon, just after the intervention in 2003. And I was there. I'd gone with a group of my fellow reporters, and the temperature in Iraq at midday around that time goes well above 100, and you have to be coated in sunscreen at all times, and you're coated in sweat anyway. And it gets in your hair and in your clothes and on your face. You're sort of covered in slime, in effect, protective slime. And that's fine until the wind gets up a bit as the mass grave is being excavated, and you find that you're being covered in a coat of powder, grey powder, which is made of people. It's the filth and the smut of people who've been buried en masse for a long time, or just being dug up and are being now blown around in a grey cloud. And you want to feel dirty, if you want to feel dirtied up by the experience of fascism, try finding that you're 12 hours away from a shower and you can't get dead person out of your hair or off your face. There's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck with it. You're tainted. You're polluted, and you're living in a country, or visiting a country in this case, which is digging itself slowly out of a generalized mass grave. So that was Iraq for very nearly 40 years. As I say, I've only time for thumbnail sketches this evening. Vignette. I wrote a piece from North Korea called Visit to a Small Planet, which is a line I stole from a play of Gore Vidal's. Because it did seem to me as if I had left this planet completely to go on this visit to the northern part of the Korean Peninsula, and that it was as if coming back from another spatial body altogether. And the article got, I have to say, for myself, a lot of praise, a lot of good reviews, and a lot of notice. And every time I got praised for it, I used to feel slightly congealed, slightly nauseated, because I knew that of all the articles I've ever written as a foreign correspondent, it was probably the greatest failure. I had not got near to describing, for an American audience, what it would be like. By the way, we know where your children go to school. What it would be like to be a North Korean even for a day. And I'm not sure I can try it even now. I'll give it a shot. My friend Martin Amis wrote a book called The War Against Cliché. Actually, The War on Cliché. Saying that, as all of us who write and think and speak try to remind ourselves, there's nothing worse than using borrowed phrases. There's nothing, once you've said, the heat was stifling, she was rummaging in her handbag, to win 2 Nobel Prizes was no mean achievement. Once you're using someone else's words, and that's part of literary intellectual death. So we try and avoid it. So when I went, I'm reeling back a little here, just to spoodle back. When I went to Czechoslovakia under the old communist regime one day in the 80s, I thought to myself, whatever I do, whatever happens to me in Prague, I'm not going to use the name Kafka. I'm just not going to do it. I won't do it. It's so easy. Everyone else does. I'm not going to. I'll write the first non-Kafka mentioning piece. So I went to this meeting of this then unknown dissident, Václav Havel, and various of his Czech friends and Slovak friends in an apartment in Prague. And we thought that no one knew that he had these visitors coming from America. And so, but someone must have given us away, because it wasn't long before the door fell in, and in came police dogs and guys in leather coats and carrying heavy electric torches and truncheons and so on, slammed me up against the wall and said, "You're under arrest and you've got to come with us." And I said, I thought of saying, "I demand to see the ambassador." I said, "Well, on what's the charge?" And they said, "We don't have to tell you the charge." And I thought, fuck. Now